Now, Executive Order number 10 of 2020, which was signed into existence last week by President Muhammadu Buhari, granted financial autonomy to state houses of assembly and state judiciaries. And a form of discussion about that has been going on as to whether or not it would improve executive-legislature relationships or make it worse at the state level. Now, at this point, we're being joined in conversation about this from our Arise Abuja studios by Hon Ben-Chuks Nwosu, a former Speaker of the Anambra State House of Assembly. We're also going to be speaking to him about more issues, including the success or otherwise of Southeast governors in managing the COVID-19 pandemic in their different states, whether or not there is a collaborative arrangement among Southeast states in this direction, in addition to ongoing efforts to improve regional security. Welcome to the program. Good morning.
Good morning, Honorable Nwosu. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Quickly, yesterday we started the conversation around this subject with Agent Owonikuku SAN. And when we put the question to him about the Executive Order number 10 of 2020, which according to the federal government is an attempt by the presidency to give effect to Section 121, subsection 3 of the 1999 Constitution. His conclusion was that this is an unconstitutional move. It is illegal. It is a violation of the doctrine of the separation of powers. Along the same line, state governors across the country have also said that this is a violation of their rights, their executive powers under Section 5, subsection 2, and also Section 162 of the 1999 Constitution. But you have been in the legislative part of the governance process in Nigeria. We would like to have your take on this particular subject.
Thank you very much. With profound respect to the learned senior advocate of Nigeria and to some other contributors, I beg to differ from their views. One, I commend the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. For me, this is the first time an attempt, a concrete, verifiable attempt, is being made to build institutions. Democracy does not thrive and does not improve and does not progress when there are no strong institutions. What are those strong institutions? According to Montesquieu, there are three arms of government: the executive, the legislature, the judiciary. For as long as we can tell, monies have been appropriated to two arms of government through one arm. That is to say, it gets to the executive before it dissipates to the judiciary and to the legislature. This act, this attitude, this process, this procedure has stunted growth of viable institutions that we need to move this country forward. For purposes of the argument, monies will be directly moved to the legislature and moved to the judiciary. You know, like many lawyers will tell you, that judges are going through trying moments at this time, doing manual recording of proceedings, judgments, all sorts of things. If monies are directed to the judiciary, the control measures will be such that important things that need to be done to improve the work of the courts, especially at the lowest level, the magistracy, will be, in my view, enhanced, because the chief justices, the chief accountants, the whole paraphernalia of court management will manage these monies prudently to address the issues that are disturbing the free flow of work at the judiciary. More so at the legislature. Most of the arguments I have had, oh, this is money that will be squandered, this is the money that they will take away. I was a legislator. Fortunately or unfortunately, I served three governors: Dr. Chris Ngige, Mr. Peter Obi, in between them, Dame, Her Excellency Dame Vejie Tiaba. And I want to tell you, from my experience serving three governors in 4 years, that it is easier for a finger to pass through the eye of the needle than for a legislator, speaker, principal officers, and everything to easily get money that is not properly appropriated from the executive. Now that these monies will come directly, people are shouting, oh, they will share it, they will do this. It is practically, from my experience, impossible to misappropriate public funds, unless you want to have a visit to Chief Magu in EFCC. The processes are this. If the money comes in, there is a proposal, there is a budget, and that budget is taken to an arm of the executive, budget and planning. It comes back. Remember, there are seasoned civil servants who work in all legislatures. They are clerks of the House, accountants of the House. These are civil servants, seasoned civil servants. It is practically impossible for a speaker, and maybe in collaboration with the principal officers, to hoodwink this setup to misappropriate funds that will be directly pushed to the legislature. The legislature requires certain things that are needed to build their institution, to make it strong, to build democracy. Some of these legislators, they don't have offices. Now, the trend is for proceedings and things to go, softwares and all that, ICT and everything. And I can assure you that more than half of legislatures lack these instruments of work. And I believe that any speaker worth his salt, when these monies come, will address these principal things. Some of them don't have offices, they don't have a library, there are so many things lacking at the legislative houses all over the country. So I do not think that it is a bazaar, either for the judiciary or for the legislature. And whenever a policy is made, we should not be attacking it on the basis of what is written or what is not written in the laws. The laws can be amended to come into consonance with the intendment of that policy. And I think that, Mr. President, like I've said before, I praise him for this. This is the first attempt to build strong institutions, the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. And it will be all good for the growth of democracy in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. That is my submission.
Thank you for your submission, Honorable Nwosu, in that regard. And I guess that the reason, well, I guess one of the reasons why the president then puts in Article 6.1 of this executive order, which then states that in the first 3 years of this order, the president has put in special extraordinary capital allocations for the courts, is because of what you have just said. But when it comes to that Article 6.1 of this executive order, how can we also ensure that what we are not going to see here is a situation of the misappropriation of funds, and these funds are actually going to be diverted into exactly what the president has stated? What do you also think of this part of the executive order?
See, I am sorry that every time there's an appropriation in this country, the first thing that comes into mind is stealing, fraud, and all that kind of thing. And I've told you, I've been in the system. It is not easy to steal public money. You will need a whole lineup of people that will cooperate with you before you can steal money from any budget. It's not easy. The money is not in your pocket, it's not in any vault, it's in the bank. There are processes, there are what you call financial rules and regulations. And these things are followed. You will have to get the clerk of the house to agree with you, the accountant of the house, the civil servants in the Ministry of Works, budget and planning, and the executive will also be looking at you. You remember, there's checks and balances, the three arms of government. It's not easy for people to be, most times people talk about fraud, fraud, fraud. Yes, it can happen. But let me tell you, it will involve an army of civil servants and politicians to make it work without it leaking, without you risking prison term. Remember also that after every tenure, there are people we now call economic auditors, financial auditors, they call them forensic auditors. If you come in there and you have done markups and you have done certain things, certain your fingers have done certain things. Remember that some people are coming to replace you. And when that person that comes to replace you looks at the record of your service, he is entitled to say, what this man said he left here, I have not seen. And that is inviting the EFCC to come here. I do not think that any public officer wants to finish serving and end up in the EFCC. Because you see, sometimes when somebody successfully, which is rare, defrauds the public, taking public funds, the checks and balances in the community where he comes from is worse than going to prison. Because whenever his children or grandchildren are passing, who may be doing well, they will say, don't you know the boy that just passed? That's the son of that thief that stole our money. It is not as easy as people think. And besides, before you got elected, your emoluments, your salaries, your entitlements are all written down. And they have not been varied by the fact that money is coming directly from the federation account to the judiciary. It's not for bazaar. And like I said, these monies are meant to build strong institutions that are not dependent on governors to grow, that are not dependent on governors to grow in the judiciary, not dependent on governors to have libraries, to have law books, to have libraries, to have courtrooms, to have electronic management of courts, to lessen the stress on the judges and the magistrates. And in the judiciary, to make it possible for us to have better legislation. If you look at some of the things that are done in some legislatures, you'll be sorry. Where rules and proceedings are typed outside, where the hazards of a legislature, which are things that transpire at the plenary and things like that. The record of proceedings may not be ready 2 years after you have left office. It is not the best. If these monies go directly, these institutions will get stronger without being dependent on the whims and caprices of the governor. And when a budget is presented this time after, when this thing takes effect, that budget will no longer be rubber stamped. It will be looked at critically, because those members of the House of Assembly who are there were elected by constituencies, and they're going to look at that budget proposal more critically than is done today. For me, it is a welcome idea. Whoever says that executive order is inconsistent with an existing law, and therefore, to the extent of that inconsistency, it is null and void, you will think about the contents of jurisprudence. Well, what is good for the majority of Nigerians?
Honorable Nwosu, well, I like your commentary on the fact that it takes a village to steal public funds. I assume you are speaking from clearly observation and experience. But let's go back to the issue of the executive order. What, has been argued is that the president acted ultra vires because the amendment of section 121 subsection 3 arising from the 4th alteration of the 1999 constitution would seem to be self-sufficient, and therefore using an executive order as a legal instrument to enforce a constitutional provision, which is already basic law, the ground norm, would seem to be supernumerarious, that is unnecessary, and the president trying to act as a headmaster over state governors. That's really the main argument. And there are persons who have recommended that the state governors should proceed to the Supreme Court to test the law. Do you agree with that?
I am consistently consistent. If the executive order is inconsistent with an existing law, then to the extent of that inconsistency, it is null and void. Ignore it. Implement what is in the law. But my question is, if it has been in the law all this while, what has held its implementation? You see, this is the point we are making. We are creating monarchs. We are creating their majesties in elected governors, which they are not. A speaker and House of Assembly cannot be running cap in hand to the governor for certain basic things to be done. And if the governor thinks that the speaker is not friendly, they will look at the appropriation, the request and bench it. The same thing with a chief judge who may not be friendly with the governor. You discover that the judiciary suffers because although there is a budget, although there is an appropriation, what is important is order for release of the funds for those things to be done. If these things have been in the law since, it's been amended, it's been there, who held up the implementation? If the president says, if the executive order is inconsistent with the law, fine, ignore it, implement it. For me, the president has played a very important political, very deft political move. Ignore the executive order, implement the law which has been there. It will come to the same effect. What we need in this country are not strong individuals. We need strong institutions, not strong individuals. Like I said before, when we were in the House of Assembly of Anambra State, like I said to you, I served 3 governors because of the peculiar nature of the history of Anambra State at that time. Crisis upon crisis, impeachments upon impeachments. But I tell you, we saw it, all 3 governors, His Excellency Dr. Ngige, His Excellency Mr. Peter Obi, Her Excellency Dem Vejie Tiaba, if you write any request to them that is not in accord with rules and appropriation, processes and everything, Peter Obi will ask you, under what heading of expenditure do you want me to retire this money you are requesting if I approve, I approve and release it? The Vejie Tiaba will ask you, my son, don't stampede me, keep the request, I will look at it. She was a teacher. She will go through it with a fine-tooth comb. So there was financial prudence among those governors that I served. Ngige was even worse. He will use a red pen to tell you to justify certain things you have put in the paper. That I think is why none of the 3 of them that I served had ever visited EFCC for any reason. So it is not easy, even if these monies go directly to the institutions, the judiciary, the legislature. The fears of people are not justified. And if you say, like I agree with you, that it is stated in the law, I'm asking one critical question. Who has held up the implementation of the contents of the law regarding appropriation and fiscal management of these institutions? Why are they still subject to the whims and caprices of a state governor? And why will the state governors go to the Supreme Court? They will go to the Supreme Court because part of their territories, part of things that they control by this executive order, if it were implemented, or the law implemented, whichever way is the same thing, will remove some of the things that they've been presiding over. Let them go to the Supreme Court. Let us see whether the Supreme Court will say that 3 arms of government should be subject to 1 when it comes to appropriation. I do not think that it is good reasoning, but it will be good. Let us go to court and try it. The law has been amended that executive appropriations, federation account and everything should push monies directly to the institutions. Why would anybody who has no corruption in him, why would anybody who does not want to be bigger than the office want to control all financial budget of 3 arms of government and give it out as he pleases?
Honorable Nwosu, thank you.
Is that how the country grows? Is that how institutions are made?
Certainly isn't.
My argument is that, as far as I'm concerned, the executive order was in good taste. But if you say that it is inconsistent with an existing law, well, yes, as a lawyer, I know. To the extent of the inconsistency, it is null and void. Since it is null and void, let us do the political thing. The president has said this is what is right. Implement it. Forget the executive order.
Thank you, Honourable Nwosu, for sharing your views with regards to this. As we said at the start of this conversation, we would also like to speak to you about other things, especially with regards to the southeast of Nigeria. Now, I'd like to bring the coronavirus into this. I mean, the southeast of Nigeria has recorded the lowest number of cases on a regional level since the first case or the first confirmed index case of COVID-19 in Nigeria. Now, what is your assessment on the way in which southeastern governors have handled the outbreak? I mean, while it looks good to have low numbers, many people have also questioned the fact that in Enugu State, for example, the first 11 cases that were confirmed were said to have been people who managed to get into the state despite the federal government ban on interstate travel. So questions have been raised, and it'll be good to get your assessment.
COVID-19 is an unfortunate epidemic or pandemic. The point is that it is a global challenge, and governors of the Southeast region, I believe, have done a whole lot of work. First, in educating the people, which is what is wrong with the federal government that has an institution that ought to have taken this job at first instance. That is the National Orientation Agency. It exists in every state, it exists in every local government, it exists in every ward, National Orientation Agency, and they talk to the people in their native language. But when this thing started, they were sidelined. I don't even know whether there has been budgets allocated to the National Orientation Agency. If they had money and funds, first of all, nobody wants to die. Get that clear. If our people are educated and they know what the risks they are running, I think they will be much more careful. What the Southeast governors have done is that they went through town unions, traditional institutions, such things to let the people know the dangers they are facing, teaching the World Health Organization standards in combating this pandemic, and so on and so forth. Now, the cross-border movements you've been talking about, permit me to submit that movements, whether you lock your borders or you don't lock your border, is a worldwide phenomenon. Otherwise, people will not be crossing the Red Sea or moving from Italy to England and vice versa. Movement of people is a known factor, either because of war, threat of war, economic reasons, or for reasons of purely, I don't want to live here anymore, I want to change. Therefore, migration is a constant challenge to the world and to leaders wherever they may find themselves. It depends on how every leader of the environment he leads handles the issue of migration. People are migrating from the north to the south. People are also migrating from the south to the north. People are migrating from Nigeria to all other places of the world. It's a challenge, and it must be handled with prudence. It must be handled with diplomacy. It must be handled with political intelligence. The Southeast governors have been meeting, and they have been trying very much to handle the thing as intelligently as they can. And I commend them for their efforts so far.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Nwosu, for joining us this morning.
Absolutely.